It's a new week for Alabama, and Alabama's already in the playoffs, and there's a lot of other things to be happy about.
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama, AHSA's radio network. Luke Robinson, that's me. Jimmy Stein with Bama Online, that's normally him, but he's on his way back from somewhere that doesn't have Wi-Fi. His house. No, I'm kidding. Sometimes Wi-Fi doesn't work at his house, though. But he'll be back with us tomorrow for sure. I didn't want to leave you hanging. We've been out for a few days, and I did have some thoughts on everything that's gone on the last few days. We hadn't even talked about Vodney Cleveland, and we will talk about Vodney Cleveland here on this podcast. But this episode is brought to you by FanDuel, by the way, and I'll tell you about FanDuel in just a little bit. Okay, so we've got to talk a little bit about yesterday because it does affect Alabama. For those who think, oh, all we do is talk Alabama, we do, but we also talk about things that touch Alabama on the periphery. And so yesterday, South Carolina, I think, helped Alabama out a lot. It sort of alleviates any Texas A&M angst. I'm not saying Texas A&M can't get in the playoffs. And I'm also not saying that, hey, Alabama can do whatever they have to do. We have to assume from this point forward, Alabama needs to win out, right? And if they do win out, I believe they will be in the playoffs. But what if Texas A&M had won last night? And what if their only other loss was to Texas in a hotly contested game, last second type of deal? Then I think the committee had some serious thinking to do about, and it comes down to it's like the NCAA tournament. You know, what if somebody weird wins the ACC somehow that wasn't going to get in the playoffs any other way, and then they beat Miami? Well, Miami's going to take one of those open spots. So, again, you know how all this works. There's no reason to rehash it or hash it at all. So I think USC East helped us a little bit. First of all, they beat Texas A&M, give them their second loss. You have to assume Alabama's going to go past Texas A&M, I think, in the rankings at this point. And I think that's very fair because Alabama's best win is better than Texas A&M's best win when it comes to Georgia. And also Alabama beat South Carolina. Now, Alabama beat them at home. Texas A&M lost to them on the road, but it was a 24-point loss for Texas A&M, and so that's not going to look super on the resume. Then Georgia getting the win over Florida. I know that most of you, like me, couldn't help but pull for Florida a little bit. And at this point, I'm beginning to think whatever higher deity you believe in doesn't like Billy Napier. I'm not here to tell you who to believe in, what to believe. Certainly not going to tell you who to vote for, none of that stuff. But if you believe in a higher power of any description, and that higher power may come from the Marvel universe, I don't know. But you have to think that Billy Napier has angered this higher deity at some point because there's been no coach that's had worse luck than this man. And he seems like he's not nearly as bad. Let me put it this way. When I watch Billy Napier coach, I think he's a pretty good coach. I also think he's had it rough. When I watch, say, Auburn, I think Auburn's got some dudes, got more talent than you think. They probably have more talent than Florida. Let's be frank. They probably do. And Hugh Freeze doesn't seem to be putting 100% effort into it. I'll talk about that in a minute. But I want to stick with Georgia. I think it is good ultimately that Georgia beat Florida. The better they look, the better our best win looks. And so I think that's quite clear. And Georgia's probably getting in. So, yeah, I don't think Alabama's going to be fighting with Georgia. And at this point, yeah, Georgia goes to Ole Miss next week. There's nothing that I've seen from Ole Miss, despite their handling Arkansas relatively easily, that makes me think, oh, that's a team that's going to beat Georgia. This is the same Ole Miss team that got beaten by a Kentucky team that's not good. We've seen that clearly. They're Auburn's only SEC win. And they also are a team that got beaten by an LSU squad that was hurting a little bit, and they were up on them. They should have won that game. I don't dispute that. Lane Kiffin in a press conference yesterday said they're about 2 plays away, not even like miracle plays, just 2 plays away from being undefeated. And he's absolutely right, but that's the thing. I mean, those teams are always a couple of plays away. It's the Georgias and the Alabamas and Ohio State that make the plays. Penn State's just a couple of plays away from beating Ohio State, for that matter. But as it stands, they can't ever beat them. I think James Franklin is 1-10 against them since being at Penn State. I mean, it's just, that's who he is. I mean, it's not going to change necessarily. Yes, he may win eventually because he wins 1 out of every 11 right now. So maybe next year is the start of a new 11 streak and he beats that one and then loses 10 in a row. But that's who he is. And I think that's what Ole Miss is. Ole Miss is a program that, and until you break that schneid, until you break through that, that barrier, then that is what you are. So I feel like, yeah, Georgia's going to beat Ole Miss next week. And that's probably good for Alabama because we don't play Ole Miss. We want everybody that we have played to look as good as they can. I always want Auburn to lose. I'm just like the rest of y'all. So, yeah, I was ecstatic that Vanderbilt went in there and beat them. And frankly, I've read a lot of the message boards because I do get some Schadenfreude. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. My German's a little rusty, as in I've never taken German. But I do get Schadenfreude from reading Auburn message boards when they lose. And it's funny to see the man, once again, the officials. Look, you're not going to get a complaint from me. SEC officials are terrible. But that's not why Auburn lost that game, not in the least. And if you want to be optimistic about the future for Auburn, that's certainly your prerogative. I think it's also fair to be very pessimistic despite the obvious influx of talent that is coming that way because they are recruiting very well. Because, boy, there's not a universe where Auburn should lose to Vanderbilt at home. Okay? And Auburn keeps losing these games where they do seem to be putting up a fight. I'm going to give Auburn a lot of credit here. They're not mailing it in. I thought if they lost to Kentucky, they might begin to mail it in, but they ended up winning that game. And in fact, they were down 10-0 to Kentucky and fought back. And they have not quit. Now, maybe they begin to eventually, but the only Auburn team I've ever seen quit on a season is that 2012 team. That's the only one I've ever seen quit. So again, that is a testament to what Auburn usually brings to the table. That being said, it doesn't mean they are very good. And I know Alabama plays them too, but Auburn's the one case where I'm like, I don't care what it does for us. I'm just fine if they aren't doing well. Vanderbilt's winning, I think, helped Alabama, takes them to bowl eligibility. And though you and I, as Alabama fans, know that going to Vanderbilt really means nothing because Alabama had a clear home field advantage. It was just clear as day that crowd was 80% Bama. It still goes down as a road loss. It doesn't go down as a home loss. And for the people that don't just immerse themselves in this, they're not going to catch that. Now, what I'm saying is the committee will probably look at this as, hey, Alabama lost on the road to Vanderbilt when all is said and done, right? And they're not going to say, oh, but they're 80% Alabama fans or 90% Alabama fans, or whatever it was. I think they're just going to say Alabama lost on the road to Vanderbilt, and that's going to make the loss look better. I'm definitely wish casting here. I'm definitely trying to find a silver lining where there may not be one. But I think it's also fair to say that. So I'm trying to not be too homerific while admitting my homerism. Now, when we come back, I do want to talk about some other things going on in the world of Alabama sports in general and some thoughts just from the off week. Of course, right now I want to tell you about FanDuel because they're the sponsor of this particular podcast and we love them so much. They've been a sponsor for a while and they are the best. Look, get ready for the NFL action and you can get ready for it today. It's going to be kicking off in like an hour and a half as the crow flies. I know that's not how that goes. But, you can tackle NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook, which is FanDuel.com. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with 150 smacks in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. It's that simple, and it's only at FanDuel.com, which, of course, is America's #1 sportsbook. Okay, so the rankings will come out Tuesday. That's always a fun time. It's another one of those benchmarks for the season for me, though, that I hate because it means the season's coming to a close. College football just goes by so quickly, and I just hate it that it goes by that quickly. But rankings-wise, I've seen several different projections for Alabama. Now, the one I probably take the most seriously is the one that comes from ESPN. And I believe that they usually put the most effort into this, and also they're pretty close to the situation, if you know what I mean, because all the ranking stuff does air on their programming. So they should have the most inside knowledge of everything, right? Okay, so they had Alabama, and I'm trying to find the actual website right now. You can tell I'm stalling. This is by Heather Dinich, who I know not all of us love. But she has Oregon 1, Ohio State 2, which I'm not on board with that. I'm just not on board with it. Why is Ohio State 2 over Georgia? Tell me why. Tell me how that makes sense. And you say, okay, well, Ohio State's loss is better than Georgia's loss because they lost #1 team. Okay, and Ohio State did go beat the #3 team or 4 team or whatever Penn State was. Okay, I think it's also very fair to say Penn State looked like a paper tiger yesterday. I would have Georgia ahead of Ohio State. Personally, I know I'm an SEC guy, but that's just me. Then they have Miami at 4, which, again, I totally buy that. By the way, Louisville did Alabama some favors last night by beating Clemson. They have Texas at 5. I would probably throw some shade on this. I don't understand why Texas is getting all this credit. Their only game that they've played that's worth a dang, they lost by double digits at home. They got doubled up at home. BYU at 6. Okay, I can buy this in the sense that I would have BYU ahead of Texas, right? I'm not saying I think BYU would beat Texas. I'm saying that BYU's schedule to me is about, if you take out the Georgia game, is the same as Texas's, right? And if in that case, both of them would be undefeated, but Georgia has the loss. And if Georgia had lost to Texas on a walk-off field goal, I would buy this. Georgia beat Texas. They doubled them up at their place. And I do think that counts. And I would like to see BYU ahead of Texas. They have Penn State at 7. They have Tennessee at 8 and Boise State at 9. Now, let me ask this. Why? Okay, Tennessee's loss of those 3 is the worst. It's at Arkansas. Their loss is clearly the worst. But I would say that their win over Alabama is the best of anybody's, right? Who in the world has Penn State beaten? What have they done to make you think they're very good? I mean, their best win now, boy, is it Illinois? I mean, and Illinois just got beat yesterday. The Broncos, Boise State, their loss is at Oregon. I'm okay with putting them at 9 because you know how I feel about the mid-majors. I don't feel like they go through the same rigors that the Power 4 goes through, so I'm okay giving the Power 4 the benefit of the doubt, but I would clearly have Tennessee ahead of Penn State. Then Notre Dame at 10, Indiana at 11, and Bama at 12. Okay, now we're talking. Here's the thing, too. I don't want Alabama to be at 12. Let me tell you why. I would love to see Alabama outside the playoffs. I hate it in a sense because I think we've got some kind of streak going with being in the playoffs. And it'd be cool to keep that going because eventually that's going to be some statistic, right? Like this team has been in the what would be the college football playoffs X amount of weeks in a row, which is a record. And I think Alabama probably has that record. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure we'll hear that on Tuesday night. But I want this team to be humbled and then be fired up. You could make the argument that if they need a ranking for bulletin board material, this team probably isn't going to beat LSU on the road anyway. But I'm wondering if this team does need that. I'm wondering if this coaching staff does need that to give the players something a little more tangible to grab onto, to give that extra push to go beat LSU in Baton Rouge this weekend. And despite our incredible success in Baton Rouge, and the only team that wins in Baton Rouge more than LSU is Alabama. We win there all the time. We've always won there. It's always been a pretty fun place for us to go play football, even when we were bad. Trust me, I was there in '98 when we go down there with Sean Alexander, have to get an onside kick. We had no business winning that game with Mike Dubose, and we win that game. That was stupid that we won that game. We won that game. So I would like to see this team maybe have a little more motivation. That said, I also want the streak to go. But if you're asking me, pick one. Do you want us in the playoff projection on Tuesday or out of it? I'm going to say out of it because it doesn't really matter. Because if we beat LSU, you can bet your bottom dollar, and we're going to be in the next projection. And if we are in the next projection, I mean, with at Oklahoma, Auburn, and Mercer left on the schedule, you feel like, okay, we're probably in the playoffs. Barring a lot of really, really, really nutty stuff, Alabama's in. So I feel like it would be better to have one more little chip on the shoulder, one more this little thing of disrespect for the team to cling to for motivation. And again, I know we're all used to Saban providing that motivation of every game is every game is every game. Vanderbilt's no different than Ohio State, whatever. But now we're in a different mindset, and we've got a different coaching staff, and they are going to do things differently. And I think it's pretty clear at this point, right at the moment, Kalen DeBoer isn't treating Vanderbilt the same way he's treating Georgia. And he's probably not going to treat LSU the same way he's going to treat Mercer, right? So whatever it takes to get this team a little more fired up, I'm into it. Jimmy and I will talk about that more tomorrow because he may have a totally different outlook than I do. And I may change mine before Tuesday. Also, by the way, I know some of y'all don't like this shirt. My wife doesn't like it either. And I know that I went viral for making fun of Kalen DeBoer's shirt at Vanderbilt. But I like this shirt. And Alabama, as I've said a million times, doesn't have a lot of cool retro stuff without the block A, right? And our color, I love our colors. I love crimson and white, and crimson, signal of royalty and power and all this stuff. I get it. But I mean, you can have more color combos with like purple and gold, and you light the purple a little bit or darken the purple, or same thing with the gold, whatever. And we don't have as many cool shirts that differentiate. And so I thought this one was the coolest of the retro shirts I could find. So at least I was trying. Give me that much. Then let's talk about basketball. Big basketball game tomorrow night. I say big. I mean, it's UNC Asheville. I don't think they're going to be great this year. It's one of the easier games on the non-conference schedule. And I mean, that is no slight to UNC Asheville. There have been years when UNC Asheville would be the number one toughest game on our schedule. It ain't this year. I'm hoping that a lot of people make it to the game. I'm not going to be able to, but I'm hoping that we have a great crowd. I can't wait to watch it. I'm going to be so anxious tomorrow to get this going. I hate that. I think it's an 8 o'clock game. I hate that, especially now with the time change, because when it gets dark about 5, this guy wants to go to bed, roughly 6:45, 7, and I have no shame in that at all. So, but I am excited for basketball tomorrow, and I'm sure a lot of y'all are too. All right, we're going to talk now about Game Time because I love Game Time. I was telling somebody today about it, actually last night. Went to a party and they were talking about the podcast, and they were like, well, tell me about your sponsors. I said, let me tell you something. There have been times when it's harder to do a live read because I have to read it verbatim or whatever. But I was like, there's some like Game Time I absolutely love because I use it all the time. So it's truly organic. Like I'm telling you, Game Time is as easy of an app for me to use as a 52-year-old male that is not very electronically inclined. Their customer service was top notch. I've used it for the World Series, used it for college baseball, college basketball, college football, NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, concerts, and I love it. And I have it right on my phone, and I can see where I'm going to be sitting, and I know I'm going to get the best price. And the only time I ever had a glitch, and it was my fault, by the way, I want to clear that up. It wasn't like Game Time screwed up and I had to contact them. No, I screwed something up and I had to contact them. And their customer service got it all handled within like 10 minutes, which in dealing with ticket people time is about 2 seconds. If you've ever had there's a very famous ticket place out there that I had a ticket deal with one time, and it took about 4 days to get it resolved. I eventually just had to get my money back because I think I missed the event and it didn't work out, whatever. But it was years ago, and I don't have to use them anymore because I use GameTime because it's the best. You want to use GameTime. Go check them out and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off that first purchase and thank me later. Vodney Cleveland. I like me some Vodney Cleveland. I'm so excited about this commitment for Alabama. This is a nice defensive line pickup for the 2026 class. He's a dude. I like Vodney Cleveland a lot. He's at Parker, which right now has become one of the pipelines for good players. Obviously, they've got Jordan Crawford and Naheem Offord, who are going to Auburn Offord probably will end up at Auburn. He's going to Ohio State right now, and I guess he could end up there. I certainly would love to get him on board at Alabama, but I don't think that was ever going to happen. They have another kid, whose name I think is Tim Smith, who's the quarterback, who's going to Miami. If you got two dudes going to Auburn, a dude going to Miami, and a 2026 guy going to Bama, you got dudes, man. They're going to be a tough out in the playoffs, which start this week for the AHSAA. Vodney Cleveland for 24/7 is ranked the number 35 player in the class for 2026. ESPN has him the number 190 player, Rivals 95, and on 3 is the number 164 player. He had offers from Georgia, Auburn, Oregon, USC. And look, say what you want to about USC. Like USC offers may not impress people anymore because USC isn't doing very well, but they recruit gangbusters. They just don't know how to coach them. And boy, there's another team, it seems like, that is like that right now, but I digress. So Vodney Cleveland, big pickup for the Tide, if you ask me. I think this is great, but it's also an in-state guy that's sort of just like, okay, you've been worried, some of y'all out there have been worried about the in-state recruiting for the Tide. Well, we knew it was going to pick up. It was just then when you think about, he's the number 4 player in the and this is all according to 24/7 out of BRHS, and I've seen him play a few times. He's a dude. He's a dude at 6'4", 210 at wide receiver. I feel better about his ending up at Alabama. I'm certainly not going to guarantee it. Tank Jones, I feel is better at ended up at Alabama. I'm certainly not going to guarantee it. Then there's Hezekiah Harris, who's committed to Auburn, and I don't see his flipping. So, Alabama could end up with and you think about Zion Gibson from Gaston City, also looking at Bama. I feel like there's some good opportunity here for Bama to pick up a lot of nice in-state commitments, and I'm super excited about it. I mean, Vodney Cleveland's going to help be a big stalwart in this class, and it all starts in the trenches, and that's the one place, that I feel like Alabama just hadn't recruited as well. On the offensive line, this particular offensive line class we have coming in for this year is about as good as it's ever going to get. I mean, it's just absolutely loaded for the Crimson Tide. Now, they got a bunch of dudes from all over the place, but they're all big, they're all strong, and Kalen DeBoer is known for having very good offensive lines and developing good offensive linemen. Then next year, there's Jackson Cantwell, there's some other guys that I know Alabama's involved with, and I feel very good about the Tide picking up another great offensive line class. But the one thing that I feel like all of us are on the same page here. Y'all tell me if I'm wrong. It seems like quarterback we've recruited pretty well. Wide receiver, I think obviously pretty well. There was a lull there after the Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy a little bit. I mean, J-Mo came in as a transfer. John Mechie was really good, but I wouldn't put him at, Jeudy, Devontae Smith, even J-Mo level. I'd say Mechie was like right beneath them. Jalen Waddle kind of thing. And there seemed to have been a lull, but maybe it wasn't as much of a lull as we thought, because a guy like Corey Brooks goes to Louisville and he's kicking butt. So, but I feel like this receiver class for Latsier Brooks, who is playing like a madman. And then Caleb Cunningham, this is a good class already, even if we don't take anybody else. The one place it feels like we've lacked is defensive line. I mean, they've been a bunch of dudes who are good, not necessarily great. No Ashawn Robinsons, no Deron Payne kind of thing. And I think we all want to pick that up. So Vodney Cleveland getting on board early might help that a lot. And if Alabama were to swing Justice Terry somehow, some way, certainly not going to predict it. But if they were to swing that commitment and that signing, okay, I would change my opinion. But I think this class has it's good, not great. And maybe 2026 is the class where we really turn defensive line recruiting on its head, because I think what we're going to be able to sell is, if you're a defensive lineman and you want to sharpen your skills, then you want to come to Alabama and practice every day against what has been an incredible offensive line couple of classes. And they are going to make you better, and you're going to make them better, and then that makes the whole team better. And I think ultimately that's what the selling point should be for the Crimson Tide. Well, listen, that's going to do it for this solo podcast. Thank you guys for joining me on this. Seen a couple of you guys in the street lately that have said you enjoy the podcast. Man, I appreciate y'all so much. Jimmy, I promise you, Jimmy and I talk about this, that we really do appreciate it when you guys reach out to us and say that you like the podcast and things like that, because it means a lot to us. And if you don't like something, tell us. We'll try not to do it. I mean, like the muting. It's so much easier for me not to mute when I'm just doing it myself. It'd be stupid for me to mute at this point. I've probably been muted this whole podcast. I'll probably have to do it over. All right, that's going to do it for today's pod. I'll be back tomorrow with more and a Jimmy Stein. Till then, roll tide, everybody.